The body is designed to last 100 years, no problem. And we just aren't doing the things we know that, can help us get there. And when you just begin a simple, journey, we start to have this conversation with your body, you realize how easy it is to actually make yourself feel better.
Today I'm here with Kelly and Juliet Starrett. Both Kelly and Juliet were national level athletes early in their careers and later became known as one of the originators of CrossFit. But I know them from their focus on the important topic of mobility, for which they are true experts. My philosophy is, if you're going to age gracefully, you need to be able to move and to move without pain. So today we're going to dive into this topic of mobility, including how we keep our mobility as we age, and even mobility for our children. Kelly and Juliet, thank you so much for being here. I've been doing a lot of interviews lately on longevity, aging, and mobility just seems so important to that. So I just want you to know I'm so excited that you're here to talk about it on Nelda Live. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us, Nelda.
Thank you so much.
Well, let's just start off with a general explanation of mobility, because I think for the most part, people just think it means stretching. What is mobility?
That is a great place to start. So let's just start with the assumption that human beings do stuff that works really well, and that we tend to not do things that don't work. That's a pretty reasonable thing, right? Well, I think if stretching was the curative, if stretching had restored us to the glory of our native capacities and all of the incredible things that human beings can do, we wouldn't be arguing about, what, did you stretch or not? Or does stretching work? So maybe we should stop sort of conflating the idea of stretching with moving through the environment. And if I'm being completely transparent, I'm not sure I want you to be stretched. I mean, rubber bands that are stretched a lot are not very dynamic. So we like to use the word mobility, and that really is sort of it allows us to separate ourselves from the word stretching or flexibility. And it seems like maybe it's just a subtle mnemonic change, but really what we're trying to define is, can your tissues move the way they're supposed to? Do you have access to just your range of motion? Are you stiff? Do your tissues slide? And then more importantly, do you have the control? Do you have the motor control? Do you have the technique? Do you have the wherewithal to put yourself into positions? And ultimately, none of that matters. It's about you moving through the environment safely for 100 years, doing whatever it is that you want to do that's important to you. But until we get to the bottom of those key roots, or we sort of solve those building blocks, which is sort of the central idea around mobility, then our ability to move freely or get up and down off the ground or be pain-free may be hampered.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, and Kelly alluded to it, but to me the key is, can you do the things you want to do when you want to do them until the day you die? Just adding in the longevity piece. And so, can you bend over and pick up your grandchild, or carry in the groceries, or go for a bike ride, or take a run, or go hike a big peak that you want to hike? Whatever makes you happy and feel actualized as a human, can you do those things and do them pain-free? To me, that's what being mobile means.
It's interesting because we are part of an aging population. Thank God we're aging because that means we're not dead. So, but
we're still here.
But in losing mobility, I think sometimes we've thought that that's just part of the aging process. Is it?
That is a wonderful question. Of all the physiologic traits that change as we age, because we do. I mean, we can start with the assumption that one is that you never stop healing and remodeling your tissues until the day you die. It's a little slower. You do not bounce back like you did when you were 17. You cannot do those things. But you're maintaining your range of motion and being a skilled mover. Ultimately, that doesn't have to change. That's sort of I'll maybe hang the word choice on it, even though maybe that's not the right word. Most of us end up missing huge swaths of our range of motion, our inability to move freely in our environment. But it's subtle because it's, as Juliet likes to say, it's use it or lose it. And what ends up happening is that, if we don't express or put our arms over our head or take big breaths or take our ankles to the end range or practice squatting on the ground, then what ends up happening is that your tissues are like, well, we just don't, and even your brain is like, we don't go there. So we'll just kind of pare those things down. They can be reclaimed, but it's certainly more difficult. So a little bit of what happens is that we end up not being able to do something or with a mechanical problem. And then all of a sudden your range of motion is important to you. And part of this is connected to the fact that humans are so durable. We're so resilient. You can tolerate so much silliness for so long. I have plenty of Olympic friends who can, smoke a cigarette, eat a little chocolate donut, and still are the fastest in the world. So we have an immense tolerance, but sometimes that tolerance gets abused, or at least taken for granted.
Here's how I think about it, Nelda. I actually really don't think we need to accept that we need to just be on the sad and steady decline until the day we die. I think really, and I'm certainly not going to say that we won't all experience the effects of aging, and that there's not also a good chance we might all face some health issue at some point in our life. But I really think the goal should be, and I the way I think about it is on a graph. You could have. I think what we've accepted is that everybody's just going downhill on the graph until the day we die. But I actually think we can aim for just keeping sort of a steady level of good health and then just falling off a cliff when we die. I think that's what we can be shooting for. And I'm not saying that we won't all experience, of course, many effects of aging. But I think what is pretty critical about this mobility piece is the connection to pain. And, Kelly will go around to speak around the world and ask audiences routinely, how many of you in the audience are in pain? And usually something like 90% of the people in the audience
95
or 95 raise their hand. And this also, by the way, includes audiences of kids. So, to us, that is definitely not something that we should accept. There are so many ways we could take care of our bodies to move the needle on sort of nagging pain and injury that, we're dealing with universally as a population. And, so to me, that's the goal. The goal is to live pain-free and feel pretty good and then fall off a cliff, at age 97.
Let me jump in, because one of the things that sometimes when we hear the word mobility, or we're thinking, hey, I need to be a better mover in my environment, it is because we've started to experience pain. So sometimes, the way we've told people to do things is like, don't eat that. It may kill you when you're 80. And you're like, what? I'm like, what are you talking about? Don't move this way. You may have catastrophe 30 or 40 years from now. And so maybe that's not the best way to go about this. But we do know, and we want everyone who's listening to appreciate that pain, the resting state of the human being is actually pain-free. And ultimately that, pain doesn't even mean tissue damage or tissue trauma. Oftentimes, it's more easy to think about pain as a request for change or a change in behavior. It's a nudge. It's just information about, like, if you and I went out for a run, or we were lifting, and I was really slow that day and really just not my powerful self, you would say, well, what's wrong with you? And I'd be like, well, I sit up drinking with my friends, or I'm super stressed, or I didn't sleep very well. And you'd be like, oh, we can kind of connect those two things. Well, pain, most musculoskeletal pain, is in that same level of category of saying, hey, pay attention here. Let's draw some attention. In fact, pain isn't even generated in your tissues. It's all a perception issue about your brain. Your brain is perceiving what's going on. And pain is such a complex, deeply personal experience driven by stress or nutrition or hydration or your family's beliefs of pain or your fear of pain or previous experience of pain. But what Juliet is pointing out, that one of the things that we can all do is change how our brain is perceiving our tissues just by restoring our ability to move. And so you actually have this really powerful tool in your arsenal, which you may not even recognize, which is, hey, something hurts. I'm going to just normalize my range of motion. I'm just going to improve how well and how easily I move. And your brain is so sophisticated, it says, that's different. Let's downregulate threat. So, what I want to do is just make sure we're parsing out this idea of being useful, this idea of being durable. And pain is really the low bar, but sometimes that's the thing that gets us moving.
It's interesting because I just want to go down this trail of pain for a moment, because, like, for instance, my husband has Asperger's, and so he's very aware of his body. I love the way he's aware of his body. And I wonder to myself, how did I become not aware of my body? Because he has so much more of a in tune to that. He stretches, he gets down, he moves. He says, I need to go bike for a while. I need to do this. And I think, well, why don't I feel that in my body? Where do we get to where the disconnect? Where is the disconnect, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, I mean, man, that is a great question, Nelda. And I think we could really solve basically all of the health problems if we could, if we could get to the bottom of that. But I do think, I don't know where the disconnect comes from, but I do really believe that we can reconnect that circuit to the extent it's become disconnected. And I think that is, moving through the environment, making sure that we prioritize walking, taking care of our tissues through a mobility practice, sleeping enough. I mean, I think it's, I really do think, to the extent that people begin to take care of sort of the big pillars of health, I think it actually becomes impossible not to be more aware of your body. For example, when I eat really well for a couple of weeks, I have like a great few weeks of eating, and then I fall off the wagon and eat a pizza, an entire bag of popcorn, I actually notice that I feel horrible, versus on the weeks where I eat pizza and popcorn every single day, I don't actually really notice. So I guess, to the extent that, the technical term for that is sort of understanding how our body is, I think is called interoception. It's sort of how we perceive and are in touch with how our body feels. I think a lot of us have lost that, but I also think it can be regained. What do you think, Kels?
Yeah, go ahead.
So how do you work then with people to maintain and reclaim this mobility? How do you work with people to help them do that?
Well, first of all, we appreciate that people actually live complex lives. And you come out of a movement tradition. So if this is the first time you've ever heard this, that's okay. It just means that your parents didn't know about it, their grandparents, and sort of you're the expression of the embodiment of, like, did you have a family that moved and, and did all these things? And,
can I just add a quick subtext? What Kelly's getting at is that what we've seen in a lot of fitness health practices is that there's this assumption that people have 2-3 hours a day to add a practice into their lives,
right?
Which Kelly and I think is preposterous. I mean, we have 2 kids, we run businesses, we're busy people. I mean, and we're even in the health and fitness space, and we 100% do not have time to add a 2-hour practice of any kind into our lives. So I interrupted Kelly, but that's sort of the backstory of how we wanted to help create something that people could actually do and be simultaneously busy people.
If I gave Juliet our busy CEO mother, woman brain, different than my brain, my simple brain, I was like, here is a checklist of things you have to do every day to be successful. She would kill me, like mobilize, walk, take this turmeric, do this squat, optimize, biohack. And what it feels like, it's just more stuff that you've got to work into your already crushing schedule. And what that sets you up for is failure in terms of succeeding those things, because, it's all or nothing. What we'd like to propose is that there are these windows of opportunity where you have real agency in your day. And right now it's a little bit different because people are at home. But typically the morning is right before, you jump on the work calls, or your kids are awake or something's happening. You have a little bit of time to do something. During the day, you can configure your day to try to get more movement in. So it's not that sitting is bad, standing is good. It's that moving is better, and you are designed to move, and you can make that look any way you want, from having a dynamic standing workstation where you get to fidget, or you sit on the ground, or you take Juliet takes all her meetings walking around the house or walking around the backyard if she can. All of a sudden you're like, okay, I can just put in a little bit more movement in during the day. And then in the evening, if you had a chance to work out in the afternoon, great. But if you didn't, what we have come to believe is that 10 or 15 minutes of getting on the ground and putting a little input into your body through some soft tissue work or some mobilization is an easy way to develop a pretty complete practice. And maybe in the morning you did a little bit of meditation or breath practice, or you just went for a walk, or you drank some water. The key here is to appreciate that if we're going to talk about your tissue health, I need to talk about your sleep and your stress, and you have to eat food. And it's not, you don't have to be heroic, but you just have to rinse, wash, repeat for a long time. And when you begin to see that there are moments in your day when you can put in a little positive input, you get to the end of the day and you're like, look, I didn't exercise or train or breathe hard, but look at all the physical inputs I had. Look what I could control when I could control it. And the next day, maybe you were able to go for a long walk, or you're able to jump into a class or do some dancing, or you like to lift weights and swing kettlebells. That's fine too. And the idea here is, when we begin to appreciate that our health and mobility is a foundation of that, being able to express your physical self in the world, this is an infinite game. You don't win this game. You sort of borrow it and play it day to day. And I think that's where we've kind of lost our minds, is that if I just go to the right Soul Cycle class and I go into this juice cleanse, boom, I won. And I'm like, okay, and then the game goes on tomorrow and it goes on the day after that. And that's where I think people have lost the thread about the possibility of making these real changes in their own lives day to day.
And that's why our mantra has always been 10 minutes a day. Because again, Kelly said this, but we really are trying to encourage people to be consistent versus being heroic. And often we see that's the difference between people who really struggle to stay healthy and people who seem to have sort of figured out a solid health practice in their life, is just consistency. Kelly and I 100% love to eat a cinnamon roll and a pizza and, drink some beers with our friends. I mean, we are not always, following some commando diet, but we're probably eating pretty well 85% of the time, right? So it's that consistency that ultimately means that our general nutrition is good. And we feel the same way about a mobility practice. It doesn't need to be more than 10 minutes a day. You could do it while you're watching Netflix at night for 10 minutes on the floor. It doesn't need to be one more thing. And I think what's nice about it is once people start putting some input in their body, they actually start feeling better and seeing the difference. And especially if you do it at night before bed, people often report sleeping better. So, and anytime as humans, the way our brains work, if we do something that makes us feel better, we're more likely to do it again. And I can tell you that when people actually start spending just 10, maybe 15 minutes a day or night at a time that works for them, putting some input into their body from a soft tissue standpoint, they actually feel better. And that drives people to do it again.
And I'll add on that people think that they're killing it. And that's an artifact of like our brains protecting us. And here's the example. You can stay up all night and you'll have wretched performance the next day. We know that is science, that is proven, but you think you're killing it. Sleep deprivation, you're like, I am on my game. It's because your brain thinks that you're killing it. Like, don't worry, kid, you hadn't slept, and you're getting C's on whatever it is you're doing, or D pluses, but your brain is still like, you're still the man, Kelly. So what we want to appreciate is that people actually can feel even better and work even harder, and they still have energy on the weekends and still be stoked. And what ends up happening, though, is that we sort of accept our base function, and our hypothesis is actually you're capable of a lot more without having to do a lot more. It's just if you turn these dials a little bit, dial in, really struggle to get 8 hours of sleep. Like, find that as the line that you will not go under, which means you may need to be in bed for 8.5 hours. 95 to 99% of all of your tissue rebuilding happens during your sleep. So if you want to have healthy skin and turn over your gut health and anything that's important to you, or, de-junkify your brain and kick out that and all the waste products, or build muscle, whatever's important to you, that happens during sleep. But we start to sort of, I got 6 hours. That's good enough, right? So, look, I'm still here. I'm still better than you. So, when we begin to appreciate that our brain is lying to us and that you cannot cheat your physiology, all of a sudden you realize that you actually haven't been tapping into how durable you are.
Well, in your book, Death's Bound, you talk about, and Juliet kind of talked just now about sitting on the floor and watching TV. You talk about walking, hinging, squatting. I mean, these are the things that we've just all forgotten how to do well. And how does that apply to just making that a part of your normal routine?
Well, I would just start by saying that our body is not designed to be stuck at 90-degree angles. All of our joints are not supposed to be at 90-degree angles all the time sitting.
All the time.
All the time. And, if people are honest with themselves, the vast majority of people are literally sitting 95% of their waking hours. Commuting, Zooming, Netflixing, eating meals. I mean, it is definitely a bit of a catastrophe of sitting.
And let me jump in and say that the line for sedentary behavior, as defined by Harvard, is sitting more than 6.5 hours a day.
Wow.
So, and that's total aggregate. I mean, what we're saying is that you're supposed to be in constant motion, but it's really easy to get that 6 hours.
Yeah. And so, we came to the standing desk thing sort of, like many things we've done sort of in a reverse way. But one of the things we started seeing in our in-house physical therapy clinic were a lot of people coming in with sort of musculoskeletal aches and pains. And, our conclusion was that it was a result of sitting too much. We would have this classic scenario of like your 45-year-old guy who's a triathlete. So he's waking up at 5, doing a couple hours of working out, and then feeling like, oh, I've checked the box of working out. Now I'm going to go sit at my tech job from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then he wonders, like, why did I blow out my Achilles? I'm so confused. And so, I think that there definitely is a downstream cost, but I think the key here and where we've gotten a little lost in the whole standing desk thing, and Kelly and I are trying to, be advocates for this, is the goal is not to stand. It is to move and be in different positions and shapes throughout your day. And I think that can look very different for different people. I choose to work at a standing desk. That works well for me. Although if you put a hidden camera on me for the whole day, you would see that I change positions probably 1,000 times in the day. I've got one leg up, one leg down. For parts of the day, I'll lean on a stool, I'll sit on a stool, then I'll stand back up. And I mean, it is just this constant, what is my next position? There's so many ways to do it. I mean, I know people who's literally putting a little alarm on their computer every 20 minutes and alarm goes off and they stand up and walk around their house for 5 minutes. I mean, whatever works for you in your work system, certainly sitting in and of itself isn't bad. What is bad is prolonged sitting in the same position hour for hour after hour after hour. And so, I think the way people can think about it is sort of like, what's my next position? How am I going to move? How am I going to change positions? Am I going to sit cross-legged in my chair? Am I going to stand up for a little while, walk around, take a call while I walk? The possibilities are endless, but I think as long as people are aware that the human body is not designed to be at 90-degree angles all day long. And this is especially true for people who are then trying to use their bodies to perform in any way athleticely. It just,
or artistically.
Or artistically, or you name it. It just is not good for the brain and not good for the body, but there are a ton of ways to address it. I think people are terrified of standing desks. Like, I can't stand all day. And that's fair, but that's not the only way to combat sitting all the time.
Nelda, you work in performing arts and been around this show for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we talk about carriage and posture a lot. We talk about being able to breathe and access your diaphragm and chest voice versus, right? I mean, all of that is part of this conversation. So let me make it relevant to some people who may be listening or familiar with that. I want you to go ahead and just find yourself where you are on your computer listening and freeze, don't move. So just go ahead and slouch down. And I want you to take the biggest breath in you can. Don't move your body, but just take a big breath here. And notice how big that was. We can measure that, but it's not very big. Now watch this. Get into a position where you can take the biggest breath. So can you change something that gave you better access to your shapes and positions? Look at you. You are in the exact same position. This is why we love you and trust you. But I want to show you that all of a sudden, just by getting myself a little bit more organized, by reclaiming or sitting up for a minute, now I take a breath. And what I did was just double my breath volume. And so what happened is there's not a good position, a bad position. Maybe we should be moving more, which unequivocally is the truth. But what you saw was that when we adopt these less effective positions, we lose a lot of capacity. We lose a lot of our native sort of strengths and gifts. So if breathing is important to you, well, why would you be in a position where you've shut off your breathing mechanism and compromised your diaphragm and pelvic floor and you can't take a big breath? And what's nice about being able to find that what we call our reference breath volume, right? A fancy way for can you take a big breath is that no matter where you are, you suddenly can find the best position that's available to you, whether you're on the bus or at a meeting or you're on an exercise bike. Can you take a big breath in and then adjust yourself? And notice that I didn't have to say, take your pelvis, move it forward 1 degree, shoulders back and down. I didn't have to say any of that. I just said, get into a position where you take a bigger breath because your brain is so clever that you knew what shape would give you better access to your physiology, would give you better access to your breath. And so what we're trying to make the case for here is, look, it's really difficult for us to say, if you do that, you'll get injured. But it is really easy for us to say, you'll do that and you'll suck, or you'll lose capacity, or not be able to tap into your native abilities. And what we know is practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent, right? And who you are and the positions you adopt all the time, that's a learned behavior. So it's nice when we give people their inputs back, because all of a sudden you can find the best shape that's available to you, and it frames this conversation a little bit more accurately. We want you to be in positions and move more so that you have better access, you have better choice, not that you're living in a little tiny room.
Well, and just to add to that, speaking of the Netflix on the floor, we are really big advocates of sitting on the floor as much as possible. That's a skill that as Americans we've universally lost and is important. I mean, you see in other countries, people actually take meals on the floor and sleep on the floor and toilet on the floor. And in those populations, they have dramatically less to almost zero orthopedic injuries, massively less. Just
less hip disease, less lumbar disease, just because they're getting up and down off the floor. So,
wow. One simple thing Kelly and I do is, again, we do like to watch Netflix, but we actually often will sit on the floor in front of our couch. Because it's just that one time of day where, hey, we have this chance to get up and down off the floor a couple times, and, just use it as a chance to sit cross-legged and make sure that that's a skill we don't lose. And, Kelly can talk about a study about getting up and down off the floor. He can talk the details of that, but I find that really interesting.
Well, I think what Juliet's alluding to is that there's a great study on mortality and morbidity that said, can you get up and down off the ground? So if you sit cross-legged on the ground, you should be able to stand up without having to put a knee down or a hand down. And the more points of contact you need to get up and down off the ground, instead of just standing up from a cross-legged position, the less likely you are to be 110 and kicking it and stealing Corvettes and racing around with your girlfriend or boyfriend or person. And the idea here is, it's one of those things where you're like, well, that seems like such a simple test, and it can't be a strength test because I'm a human being and I get up and down out of my chair all the time. But that simple range of motion and balance and coordination test is a really nice sort of touch base, because if you have it, it's so easy. But if you can't sit cross-legged or don't have the range or the hip motion to change your balance, all of a sudden you're like, wow. And this notion, I think the best analogy we can throw at this is, if you put an orca into captivity, ultimately that orca fin will begin to fold over. And that's because the orca isn't doing what orcas do. It's not swimming and fighting and hunting and playing and doing orca stuff. And you've changed its environment. It's now at the surface of the water all the time in ways that it wasn't. Well, that's really your tissues. You're not doing the things that human beings have done for 2.5 million years of evolution, and certainly the last 10,000 years. And then add into the fact that you're now at the surface of the water in your chair all the time. And what we see is that the tissues change. And then we're really surprised. Why did that orca fin fall over? Well, it turns out it wasn't being loaded. It wasn't being used. And really what you hear Juliet and I advocating for is, hey, you don't have to be a world-class athlete, but you have to load your tissues. And there's so many ways to do that. Tai Chi, yoga, Qigong. You can hike with a backpack. You can walk up heavy hills. You can lift weights it just doesn't matter. We're totally agnostic. But it's easier to say, did I load today? Did I actually use my tissues, or did I just sort of spend all my time at the surface of the amusement park getting fish fed to me while my fin was folding over?
Well, so, I also don't think anybody really, one thing I think about a lot is that people might want to create like a longevity goal. And let me tell you what I'm thinking about, right? Like in our regular lives, we all have business goals and family goals, and we think those things. But, I would suggest that people actually take some time to think about, like, what do I want to be able to do when I'm 75 or 80 years old? Because if I don't do those things now in my 40s or 50s, I won't be able to do them. Let me give you an example. My mom is very fit. She's 77 years old. But when she turned 67, she actually, for whatever reason, she lost her ability to ride a bike. She hadn't practiced riding a bike. She hadn't practiced her balance enough in her 40s and 50s. And so she felt too nervous riding a bike starting at age 67. And that was a big light bulb moment for me, because here again is my mom, who in every other way is very fit, very healthy, zero health problems, but she literally lost the balance and ability to ride a bike at age 67. And she did because she hadn't practiced that skill. So, what is it that you want to do when you're in your 70s and 80s? I know I want to be able to go hiking in the Alps and ride my mountain bike and, play with my grandchildren. I know I want to be able to check all those boxes. So if I don't in my 40s and 50s, which is why Kelly and I think those are such critical decades to sort of like lay the foundation for a healthy end quarter of our lives. I really think it's important to think about, what do you want to be able to do? Because if you're not doing that now, you definitely aren't going to be able to do that when you're 80.
Yeah, I see that. So Juliet, in follow up to that, one of the questions I have, and this kind of comes from personal, because I've had an emergency surgery years ago that ended up with every decade me having another surgery. Yay. And I'm 502. So anyway, but the truth is that because of that, I am one of those people that's like, I want to know, how do I get my mobility back, not just after some kind of injury, but actually accident or surgery?
Yeah, I'm with you. Unfortunately, I've had a ton of surgeries, sadly, and it's not fun. And you're exactly right. Surgeries beget other surgeries, so I'm sure I will have more in the future. Again, I would go back to what we said at the beginning, which is baby steps, a small 10-minute a day mobility practice. And by that, I mean getting on a foam roller, a lacrosse ball at night in front of the TV. I would add being aware of moving as much as you can throughout the day, whatever that means to you, whether that's walking or gardening or getting up and down from your computer at intervals, switching to a standing desk.
Your brain doesn't care.
Your brain doesn't care. All those things actually add up in terms of reclaiming your mobility after some kind of catastrophe or injury or surgery. All those things will add up in the aggregate to helping you be able to move more. And then again, I mean, I know we keep going back to this because we're supposed to be the mobility people, but man, prioritizing sleep is, to me, if I could take all the pillars of health, nutrition, exercise, movement, you name it, to me, that is like in a league of its own in terms of importance. Because I think without that, it's hard to have any of the other things, any of the other puzzle pieces fall into place. So I think, again, going back to consistency and also just placing an intention every day on, how am I going to move around and take care of my body a little bit? And that doesn't mean having to sign up for a 2-hour massage or go see your chiropractor at all. That just means having some intention around continuing to move throughout the day, sitting on the ground when you watch Netflix, taking some time to put some input into your body in the form of, rolling or, other soft tissue work. And that's really it. And I think the key is, if you, take that intention and add a little consistency to it, you can gain back so much.
No, you're hearing that from a 3-time world champion, a superstar athlete, right?
Yeah.
How reasonable she's become. Like, you should just move. Let me give some granularity to that. 1, 7 hours or less is, you are in survival mode in sleep. Like, let me be super clear. If you went to bed at 11 and got up at 6, you did not actually sleep 7 hours. You were in bed for 7 hours. And so when people have pain with us, for example, we see a lot of people with very chronic pain and persistent pain. One of the things that we do is to say, hey, I need you to track your sleep. So if you want to make a change in your tissue quality and your robustness, your health, your ability to tolerate more silliness, then you need to get a sleep tracker initially and start tracking your sleep a little bit. Juliet is a really good sleeper. We have been protecting our sleep, but recently she found, she's like, look, if I need to get 8 hours of sleep at night, I may need to be in bed for 8.5 hours.
Or 9 hours.
Or 9 hours.
That was a real revelation for me. I got this tracker called the Whoop. I'm not working with them. It's just a, side plug. I'm a fan of what they do. But, that for me was the most interesting revelation about track, because it's I think one of the best sleep trackers out there. For me, that was the most interesting revelation. Is every night I was like, oh, I went to bed at 10 and got up at 6, and in my mind I'm like, God, check the box, I got 8 hours sleep. Nope. And like half those nights it would be 6 hours and 58 minutes of sleep, because it is totally normal to lose about an hour of sleep throughout your night from disturbances, little time to fall asleep, you name it. It's pretty common and totally normal to lose about an hour of sleep. So if you are shooting to get 8 hours of sleep, you need to be laying in bed for 9 hours, people. That was a giant revelation for me.
Second, you need to walk 10,000 steps a day. Now, our history is that, hey, maybe it was 8,000 steps, someday it was 6,000 steps probably, but someday it was 15,000 steps. And the reason, the 10,000 step came about is actually because of the original Japanese pedometer, which was the thing that started this kind of walking, counting craze. And it was called like the 10,000 step meter. But really, someone fell in there. And the idea is I need to decongest my body. I need to move those fluids through. I need to improve my circulation. And my feet and balance and breath, all of that matters. And so there's so many complex physiology, so much complex processing happening when I'm walking. But just remember, I got to get that 8 hours of sleep. If I want to be killing it, if I want to survive, it's 7. So you're 5 hours of sleep. People are always like, well, Bill Clinton only slept 4 hours of sleep a night, 4 hours a night. I'm like, and he died of a heart attack and we had to resuscitate him with drugs and electricity, right? You cannot cheat your physiology. It doesn't matter who you are. I know you're a light sleeper and you don't need to sleep everyone else does. Wrong. I don't believe it. Especially when we start to try to untangle chronic pain or chronic discomfort. We need to get first principles first. Then we roll into what Juliet said is, hey, let's get on the ground and start putting some input into our body. So one of the ways that you can upregulate how your body is aware of itself is just through touch. And, one of the things you can do if you lay on some soft balls, you're laying on a roller, is you're putting some input into your body and you're helping your brain know where everything is. And so sometimes we think that it's this lack of input that's part of the problem for why we see really strange chronic pain and persistent pain. We're just not moving or feeling or experiencing enough. I mean, this is why I think people are loving to get hot and get cold. They love to lay on spiky mats. Again, it's just about bringing awareness back in. But if you've ever laid on a roller of any kind, you can work on whatever's stiff, whatever ails you, it doesn't matter. This is the entryway. But if you put pressure on a tissue, it should be painless to compression. So if you lay on your stomach and you put a ball underneath your leg and your quadriceps, the front of your thigh, and it hurts, you have found a tissue that we believe to be stiff. And it doesn't mean that tissue is injured. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong. You don't have rabies of the thigh. But what you found is, hey, I have a tissue that's become sensitized to compression. And that may mean it's just over stiff or the tissues aren't sliding or it's not well height. It doesn't matter what the mechanism is. But if you lay on something and it hurts, then you have found a place to work. And it's that simple to begin. What we'll say is people are like, well, when I hurt myself, I'm like, well, let's establish some rules. One is you're a durable human being who just binged on a bunch of Cheesecake Factory last night. So you can't hurt yourself. But normal tissues are painless to compression. And you're working at an appropriate depth if you can always take a breath. So we want you to, if you push on something or you're doing yoga or you're in a position, and if you find that you're holding your breath, that's a message to your brain that's a threat. So we say you don't own a position until you can breathe in that position. So if you can't breathe in a position, you don't own that position. If you're mobilizing and you're putting a ball or something in your soft tissues, you need to be able to take a full breath in and full breath out. Now, lastly, I want to give you a quick technique that'll help you desensitize that. So it's really easy to remember. If you find some part of your body that hurts to compression, put a little, and again, it's sensitive, whatever that means to you, right? You can take a full breath in, full breath out. If you can't, then modulate your pressure. But what I want you to do is take a 4-second inhale, wherever that painful spot is. I want you to flex the muscles over the ball or the roller for 4 seconds. So 4-second inhale, 4-second contract, and then slowly breathe out and relax for 8 seconds. And it turns out that one of the ways that we can modulate our own musculoskeletal pain is through breathing, is through this input, this non-threatening input. There's a lot of really powerful medicine in here about making myself feel better. And all of a sudden you'll realize, oh, that doesn't hurt as much there. I'm telling my brain, this is fine to have this pressure. I'm restoring how these tissues slide. I'm putting blood flow back in there, working on a whole different level of things. And you notice that we didn't say stretch. What we said was, let's get on the ground and do a little input. Let's get some contract, relax. So normal tissues are painless to compression. You should be able to take a full breath. So that's how you know you're not tweaking yourself, going too deep, right? And then lastly, if you find something that hurts, take a 4-second inhale, contract for 4 seconds, Relax and blow out. Shh, it's all good here. 8 seconds. No one ever fought a tiger while exhaling for 8 seconds.
Let me just add to throw in a little data point here, Nelda.
Yeah.
But as long as we've been recording why people go to their primary care physician, up until from the beginning of time till the year 2000, the most common complaint for people going to see their physician was the common cold. And in the year 2000, that script flipped and it became musculoskeletal injury. And that's actually, or pain, which is really the sort of reason why we started doing what we do. Because I'll tell you that most primary care physicians have almost zero training in medical school about how to manage and deal with musculoskeletal injuries and pain. And what training they do have is pretty limited to just prescribing pain medication. And again, there is a time and a place for pain medication. I am not against it. I'm just saying that one of the things we've tried to do in our organization is give people some tools to take a crack at fixing themselves before they have to resort to, Vicodin or something even more.
Or let's just say that, hey, these are self-soothing techniques, and your physician's going to give you a medicine to self-soothe, right? Well, you've already reached for that. Ibuprofen, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, alcohol, THC. People are already trying to self-soothe.
Yeah. So we're just, we're trying to give people the sort of education and empowerment to say, let me give you an example. I was riding my mountain bike last week downhill, and it was a long downhill on my mountain bike. And as I was riding down, my low back got really sore and tight. And what I thought to myself, given the work that we do, is I thought, oh, well, I've actually been sitting more than normal and riding my bike a lot. My quads must be stiff. And that is why my low back hurts. So when I get home, I need to go spend some time working on my quads. And so I'm lucky that I've been doing this for 20 years. And I sort of have this awareness that, guess what? My quads, even though they're on the front of my thighs, they're connected to my low back. And if I have stiff quads, my low back is going to hurt. But it's that kind of basic education that we've been trying to get out to the masses over the years, which is, hey, before you spend time and money going to see your physician, chiropractor, PT, or catastrophize, or take ibuprofen or smoke weed or whatever it is you're doing to self-soothe, spend a little time sort of, understanding how your body should be working, and take a crack at fixing yourself with some simple tools that you can do at home. That is really empowering for people. And it's interesting even to see people who have been following us for many years, they become like their neighborhood fixer. Our friend Margaret is, now if anyone has low back pain in the neighborhood, they don't call us, they call Margaret, because Margaret has been working with us for long enough that she knows some simple at-home fixes for people with low back pain. And it's very empowering. These are people who would have had to go to the ER. Mine is just a quick call and 10 minutes on their garage floor with a lacrosse ball.
Well, let's transition there then, because you've not only been reaching out to the masses of people, but you've been you started a nonprofit called Stand Up Kids. Let's talk about that, because you're also reaching our young kids, right, with this message.
Well, we've always believed that high performance environments are our working laboratory, right? You have less tolerance. If you are working at Google, if you're working at, you're on the NFL, you play Major League Soccer, something, these high performance environments which we find ourselves tell us about best practice a lot, especially physically. And I think it was 2010, we did a talk at Google about, hey, let's maybe change the narrative around why you are sitting so much. And let's give you more choice. You can perch, you can, and again, we always are like, hey, we should take these lessons and practices from our high performance environments and actually translate them back to the rest of us mortals. How do we know how to eat and sleep and perform? Well, it's because in this high performance world, that's the difference between first place and last place. So if that's best practice, why don't we do it? And really, E.O. Wilson says that, the evolution biologist is like the highest calling of science is to serve the humanities. And well, that's what we tried to do. So fast forward, we were like lecturing all these adults and teens about moving and not sitting. And we looked at our children and they were sitting all day long.
all day long. And, then with, the obviously massive explosion of technology, it's they're on their computers to do their homework. I mean, now, of course, in COVID, they're on Zoom all the time, but
it's 10 to 12 hours a day.
Yeah. I mean, we really kind of took, and our kids are both athletes and play sports, but it didn't matter. Even with an hour or two of sports practice a day, they were still sitting 12, 14, 15 hours a day between school and home and homework and you name it. The other thing we saw is we actually volunteered at our daughter's field day. And we got an up close and personal chance to see how the kids were moving through their environment. And it was actually really disturbing. It was a sack race. So a couple things we noticed. I mean, the first thing is a lot of the kids just lack the range of motion to literally get their foot into the bag. And then a lot of the kids literally didn't really know how to jump forward. I mean, there were some really really obvious missing physical skills that any fourth grader should have. And, to us, the only explanation is the amount of sitting that kids are doing. I mean, that's the only difference between what my childhood and my daughter's childhood looked like. It is, they're sitting a lot and we weren't sitting a lot. Let
me give you another analogy before we kind of talk a little bit more about what we tried to do to solve this. Every kindergartner is a sprinter. They all look like Usain Bolt. They all look like Olympic sprinters. They sprint everywhere. They run on the ball with their feet. They run like elite athletes run. And they don't warm up. They just sprint. But halfway through the first grade, the cohort splits. And all of a sudden you start to see kids do this thing called heel striking, which means that they run in sort of a breaking hinged position where their leg is actually not underneath them, but actually slowing them down. And and if they want to sprint again, they have to change their motor pattern again. They have to actually change. So it's like I write slowly with my left hand, but I write quickly with my right hand. You have one motor pattern that you do the same faster or slower. So if you look at what is it these kids got over, New Year's, they all asked for heel striking, and what it turns out was that they couldn't, because their bodies were changing from the behavior of sitting and while they were growing, they were fundamentally altering these basic human movement conditions, and they were heel striking, which is crazy. So halfway through first grade. So when we started really connecting the dots, we were like, I wonder if we have some technology we learned in a high performance environment we could apply backwards. So we went and approached our principal and said, hey, we have this hypothesis. We like to test it on our elementary school, a little public elementary school. And Juliet, our attorney, and me, the physical therapist, ready to go. And we were ready to make our case. And in 2 seconds, our principal was like, yep, that sounds great. Let's convert this sitting classroom to a standing dynamic classroom. Let's give the kids a place to fidget where the desk fits them, where they're individually heighted. We were like, great. So we did that, and it was such a success. We had a chance to flip the entire school the next year. And now we're in year 8.
I think we're in year 8, and, our daughter Caroline, who's now in middle school, she never sat at all during her entire elementary school career. And again, let me be very clear. These kids are not standing like statues. Throughout the day, they have these fidget bars on their desks, so they're swinging their legs. They're getting, teachers were taking some of the lessons on the ground, everybody sitting crisscross applesauce. And, but again, if you put a hidden camera on any of these classrooms, what you don't see is a bunch of kids standing like statues. You see a bunch of kids moving. And, the biggest impact, I think, were on a lot of the kids who, are the kids who have much more of a drive to move and fidget already. So, and oftentimes that's boys. So we heard so much feedback from parents where, and teachers alike, where, hey, this kid would have normally been punching his neighbor, but instead he can fidget and move and get his energy out, by through movement in ways that kids are supposed to be moving. And so it really solves behavior problems. There's really interesting, research coming out of University of Texas at Austin, about the potential impact on childhood obesity if kids are standing and moving more at school. So,
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M. There's just a lot of potential. And so we've just been slowly but surely trying to flip desks around the country at schools as much as we can. And we're now actually working. It's been paused thanks to COVID, but we're actually working with researchers out of UC Berkeley to do, a year-long study of 4th grade classrooms and get some additional data on the benefits of standing desks. One thing I'll say that's really interesting is that teachers are all about it. I mean, we actually thought we were going to have to convince teachers that this was a good idea. And what we realize is teachers are ground zero of being the recipients of our children who have not moved enough and have been sitting too much and eating too much sugar. And they are open to ideas to get kids moving more in the classroom and give them opportunities to get their energy out. So it was interesting when we started this, we thought, oh, teachers are going to be like a blockade. We're going to need to convince them this is a great idea. Nope. They got it in 2 seconds because they're the ones that are with our kids for, 6 to 8 hours a day, dealing with the fact that they're supposed to be moving more and aren't.
Juliet had a little calculator, and she calculated if she just during her work hours did some fidgeting, leaned, perched, just didn't sit down. Like you can lean up against a bar stool. That's totally okay. That's perching. But you're still working. You're sort of making your body have to do a little bit more work just by not being able to slouch into the chair. And she calculated that she, at her little small frame, would burn an additional 100,000 calories a year just by not sitting while working. And I don't know if you realize how much ice cream, 100,000 calories.
That is a lot of ice cream.
Which is the way I think about it. Well, it turns out that the research is showing that with children, every year a child sits, they usually add 2 percentages of body mass index. 2 percentage points go up. And what they saw from the research between 5th and 6th graders is that over 2 years, those kids who were at traditional desks went up 4 points, and the kids that were at move-in desks went down 4 points. So that's a delta of 8 body mass index percentage points by doing nothing. Not having to have a program or a teacher or after-school activity, just by giving the kids choice of moving. And that's really where we just have to rinse, wash, repeat, and let the processes and the fundamental sort of principles of being a human being, just let those things ride, because we are that durable. But that's, for us, and we're like, oh, that sounds like a silver bullet for childhood obesity. And it's a real issue to try to get kids moving more. And if you've ever been around or had a conversation about food with a family, man, that is a third rail. Jamie Oliver almost got killed when he was like, hey, pizza is not a good breakfast food, right? So, what we realize is, man, we're going to have these bigger, more complex conversations with families and society. But at school, that seems really easy for kids to do better on math, learn better, not get in as much trouble, feel like they have more agency, have better interactions with their teachers.
Have more focus.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you care about? The only, I will say, we did get some feedback that some of the teachers were a little bit bummed because they got through the curriculum a month early.
Wow.
So they had. Here's what I would add to that. One of the reasons we like the kid standing desk is, and the word we use is elegant, but it is so simple to implement. It is a simple change of environment. And again, Kelly alluded to this, but one of the challenges with health programs for kids, especially in low-income schools, is, if you're going to do a before-school workout program, you have to hire someone and pay them, and they have to show up, and the kids have to show up, and there's transportation issues. And I mean, or same thing, it's getting people to change how they eat is very complicated, and food at school is very complicated.
Yes.
But just plopping in a standing desk in lieu of a sitting desk, kids don't need to be trained how to use it. They instinctively understand. They know how to fidget. They move. Unlike adults, they get it. They aren't in pain when they stand. They immediately adapt to it. And I will say some of the parents reported, well, wow, my kid's actually coming home and they're more tired. And we're like, great. Kids are supposed to be exhausted. They're supposed to pass out exhausted when they go to bed. So yes, if that's the only complaint, that they're more tired, yes, then we've done our job. And so it's just, it's a simple, elegant solution. And one of the reasons that we're so excited to get more, sort of research on it and that we know will be positive is that, our hope is that, our little teeny nonprofit, we can make little baby steps in terms of, flipping schools in certain classrooms and helping teachers with that. But what we want is there to we want to have enough research so that governments see that this can be a gigantic positive health impact for kids. And then anytime there's budget to redo a new school or, build a new school, you name it, that the go-to is just, we're putting standing desks in. That's just the given. Like that's what we do. So that's sort of what we're shooting for and why we've moved our attention a little bit as an organization from putting desks into classrooms and onto research, because we realize that it's not until we can get it, these as the norm, in every single state that we're going to have this gigantic impact. So that's our goal right now.
Well, I would love to have y'all back when you get that research done. I know you're probably going to be writing a book about it. I hope you will be. I'd love to have y'all come back on and let's talk about that again, because that just so near and dear to my heart. I used to teach, so you know. Oh yeah, I know. So yeah, love to.
So let me, if
you know what it's like to be on the end,
and you're like, hey, I want to get some more movement in, and you're like, but I want to work a little bit more. Let me tell you how to set up a standing desk at home.
Okay,
just real quick, couple rules. One, we love you to have a bar stool. That's great because we want you to perch and fidget and lean and take a break, and it's totally okay. But even those positions is different. Second, you have to have a place to put your foot. So there are these places before the shutdown called bars where people could go have a drink. And at the bottom of every bar, there's a rail. And the bartenders figured out that if you gave a place for people to put their foot up, they would stand around and drink longer because it takes some of the load out of your back. Gives you a place to fidget. So we say it's not a standing station until you have a place to put your foot. And that can be
Amazon box.
Amazon box can be a
does not need to be anything
there's
fancy.
These things that used to be called phone books. They were around. It doesn't matter. But
some old textbooks.
The
whatever.
main thing is from getting the height right is that if you put your hands parallel to the ground and you go from your elbow to the floor, you need to go elbow to the floor plus 1 inch or a little bit more. And what you'll see is you're like, oh, that takes out of takes some of the load out, but that's the right height. We see people working at standing desks that are too low and then they are uncomfortable and and they get this feedback from their body. This is really uncomfortable, so people stop using. That makes good sense. But as soon as it's the right height, I don't have to remind you to sit up. I don't have to remind you not to slouch. I don't have to remind you to tuck or do it. Like you're just in a good position and the environment is cueing you. It's almost like we are human beings and we're masters of our domain and we can shape the environment because we have thumbs. And all of a sudden you're like, I'm in control. I'm the captain. And that's really the goal here is to just to sort of take your environment back.
Such good stuff. I know that people are really going to want to know. So let's talk about your new site, The Ready State. Where are they going to find there?
Well, the main program at the Ready State is a program we call Virtual Mobility Coach, and Kelly will die, but we like to say it's like having Kelly Starrett in your pocket. I know he hates that, but we love it. We think it's very sweet. The goal with Virtual Mobility Coach is to give people simple tools to be able to take care of their own bodies. And there's a lot, we offer a lot of different ways to do that. We have a section called Daily Maintenance, which is where, you can AirPlay it up onto your TV at night and they're 10, 20, 30-minute follow-along videos. So you can sort of take your own brain and planning out of it and just get, a foam roller and a crossball and follow along with us. We have a whole pain section where if you are feeling sort of a nagging pain and injury, you can go click on an anatomy guy and, learn about how we think about pain and be given some tools and strategies to start to take care of your own body. We also have a huge section where we have pre and post workout and sports. So if you're about to go do a cycle, you can get some exercises and movements about how to take care of yourself before and after you work out so that you can, hit it again the next day really hard. And, we also have just a lot of education and information about understanding how your body works, going back to the thing I said earlier, which is what we hope the ultimate result of our work is that people sort of have a basic understanding of how their body works and have some simple basic tools to take a crack at fixing themselves when they feel nagging pain and injury. And so that's the sort of the broad goal of our content. But what we've tried to do is give people sort of simple and easy pathways they can take to follow along and take care of their body with just a couple simple tools.
And if you've never, ever done any of this kind of work before, if you sign up, we have a 2-week free trial. And in those 2 weeks, we'll teach you the basics. It's an on-ramp course, a little bit every day. So you could cancel after 2 weeks and still come out and be like, I don't know what to do with this roller and this ball. I got this. The other thing that's really fun about the site is that we have these great 14-day challenges or just programming around a specific topic for 14 days where we get to deep dive. And every day there's a little bit of work. And so what we realize is that we've just pretty much unempowered, disempowered people who don't know how that their bodies work or take care of themselves. And what we realize is we just need to start. And if we give people these little doses of little bit every day, you start to become a ninja. You start to be able to make yourself feel better. You start to be able to take care of yourself. You start to have input in. And the things we hear are really remarkable. People thought, didn't think they could change something, or didn't think they could reclaim emotion, or didn't think they'd ever do a sport or an activity again. And they do. And, the bottom line is, the body is designed to last 100 years, no problem. And we just aren't doing the things we know that, can help us get there. And when you just begin a simple, journey, we start to have this conversation with your body, you realize how easy it is to actually make yourself feel better.
And you mentioned earlier, Nelda, like, how do I reclaim my mobility if I know I've lost it? I mean, this is the place to start. You've got to start somewhere. And I can't tell you how much feedback we get from, people in their 50s, 60s, 70s who literally thought, oh, I thought it was hopeless. I would never be able to squat down again or get it easily.
Chronic pain the rest of my life.
Or I would be in chronic pain the rest of my life. I mean, we often have, feedback coming in from our members and clients saying that they themselves are shocked that they were actually able to make the change by just doing a consistent practice. So I would say that's a place to start. I mean, you can use it as much as or little as you like, but again, it goes back to that consistency thing. There's content there. It's new and different every day. So if you come back and, every night you want to watch for 10 minutes and get that input into your body, that would be a great way to get started.
And lastly, I would just say we call it the ready state because you know what you need to get ready for. We know that it's up to you about what's important to you. Juliet and I have our own feelings about what you should be able to do, but really it's the context that matters to you. And so what do you want to get? What do you want to do with your life? What do you want your body to be able to do? That's what we want to help you achieve.
Yeah, like what do you want to be ready for? And again, that's so different for everybody. I love mountain biking, so I want to be ready for mountain biking. But I know my mom wants to be able to, she's 77 and she just wants to be able to hike with her friends in the mountains. I mean, it really can be so varied. So that's why, the sort of readiness concept is so important to us. And I will say too that because, obviously the core of our offering is teach people to understand how their body works and moves and a mobility practice. But as you can tell from listening to us, all the other pillars of health, sleep, nutrition, hydration are all so important to this practice. So we actually have a really dense, great blog, and we publish a new article every week on a variety of health-related topics, not just mobility topics. And that's another place people can start. I mean, that is chock full of information about general health topics. As we've learned that it all matters. And so we can't just offer this one thing. We have to, broaden out the information. So there is, more information on the Ready State than you can shake a stick at, and a ton of it is free. So it's easy for people to explore and get to know us.
Okay, I have one more thing before I let y'all go. I had a audience question. All right, see if you can do this in a minute or 30 seconds or whatever. What is down regulation? And where does this fit into general fitness and mobility?
Oh, perfect question. So when I say downregulate, think of how good we are going from 0 to 60. 5-hour energy, more caffeine, espresso, optimize. How do you hit the brakes? How do you relax? How do you go from
what's your strategy for that?
Flight to rest and digest? Well, most of us are reaching for an alcohol bottle or a THC or TV. We're trying to make ourselves calm down and relax. So one of the things that happens, if you've ever had a massage before, you did not get up off that massage table ready to fight someone or lift or sprint. I mean, you are chilled out. But what we know is that some of that input into the body can help you shift your state of mind into feeling relaxed, into feeling sleepy, into feeling out of that sort of frenetic, frantic pace. So when we say downregulate, we mean go from 60 back to 0. And it turns out that soft tissue mobility practice Juliet's talking about in the evening can help you do that, can help you get out of that go to hit the brakes and start to feel like a human being again.
All right. Well, you know what? I just want to thank y'all, first of all. I want to thank you so much for caring about people and mobility. Thank you for really and truly the stand-up kids. I cannot wait to come back and talk with y'all more about that at some point in time. I'd love to hear more about that and how that's going and what you're finding. I'm thinking, okay, so y'all have sleep. All right, folks, are y'all listening to them about Sleep. Please listen to them about sleep. So many different people have talked to me about sleep, and we just, it's not about, oh no, I have to go to bed now. It's about, hey, yay, I get to go to bed, right? So
yes,
let's just
exactly.
change. Thank y'all so much, and also, folks, the Ready State. That's where you can find Juliet and Kelly Starrett, and I just thank y'all so much for being here.
Nelda, thank you so much for having us. It's just an honor to be here and so fun to talk to you.
Oh, yeah, you too. So we'll get together again some other time. I would love to follow up on all those things.
Deal.
All right. Thanks so much.